Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. Welcome to the Banzuke breakdown for Haru Basho in March of 2023. As usual, we're going to go through how the Banzuke broke down, how it compares to our picks for Guess the Banzuke, and what we can take away from it in terms of figuring out how Banzukes are going to work in the future. Alright, let's get into it. Let's start with Guess the Banzuke. So you can see a lot of colors on the screen, right? On the left, we still have the color coordination from our original picks. The blues are the ones that went up, the reds are the ones that went down, the whites are the ones who didn't move. On the right, white is 2 pointers, the ones that we got exactly correct. Greens are ones that were swapped from our picks across east and west. So those are going to be worth 1 point each. Yellow and red for Guess the Banzuke don't score anything. Yellow was 1 rank off, and that's it. So you're going to see that there are some that are basically direct swaps. It just happened to go up and down in numbers, so those don't score. And then red is really, really bad. Not necessarily really bad, but it was off by 2 or more ranks. So we can talk about why that happened, and it actually is really interesting. So let's start at the top. In the upper Sanyaku, we didn't have any surprises. Obviously, Terunofuji and Takakeisho are staying exactly where they are. Wakataka Kage and Hoshoryu are staying where they are, and Kiribayama, as expected, moved up to Sekiwake 2. Wakamoto Haru and Kotonowaka got flip-flopped from what I expected, but really that's just a matter of I thought Kotonowaka was going to get that little mini promotion within Komusubi from west to east because he had a winning record, and Wakamoto Haru would just be kept behind him. Instead, they promoted Wakamoto Haru ahead of Kotonowaka because he had a better record. It's simple enough, easy to explain, no big deal, we move on. The Komusubi 2s turned out as expected, as did Maegashira 1 East and 1 West. Shodai went exactly where we would expect a Sekiwake with 6 wins to go. Now Maegashira 2, 3, and 4, I'm a little mad about Maegashira 3 because for these, I did one of them by the numbers, and that was Mitakeumi and Nishikigi. I had Mitakeumi ahead for several drafts, but I moved Nishikigi ahead because I couldn't figure out a really good reason other than "'cause we want to" for why Mitakeumi would be given preference, and that's exactly what happened. But Abi and Ryuden and Onosho and Meisei, those were situations where it really did make sense for it to turn out the way it did, and I had them flip-flop for reasons of, I'm just vibing that way. That's how it feels. I just think Ryuden's gonna go ahead. I just think Meisei's gonna go ahead. And I was wrong. So for Maegashira 2 and Maegashira 4, if I end up doing really badly and Guess the Banzuke, I'm gonna blame these two, but it's probably not gonna mean that much. Overall, I scored 51 points, and those two only get me to 55. The winning score is going to be a lot higher. In any case, there's no real question about why these decisions were made. Abi was 8 and 7, and Ryuden was 9 and 6, 2 ranks below. Ryuden was slightly outside the joy. This is the kind of situation where even though in the previous Basho they gave a lot more priority to winning records, this is not at all surprising to see the 8 and 7 get his rank before the 9 and 6. No big deal. Mitakeumi, again, that's a little surprising because they limited him to 1 rank down. This does look like joy favoritism because he was Maegashira 2 versus Nishikigi being at Maegashira... What the hell Maegashira was he? 5. He was Maegashira 5. So it looks like Mitakeumi essentially got the same treatment as Abi as opposed to their Maegashira 5 counterparts. Okay, fine. But that makes it all the more surprising that Onosho, who was Maegashira 8, ended up behind Meisei, who was Komusubi. Now, Onosho was a half rank ahead of Meisei by calculation, so that isn't that strange, but it's still a little surprising that this is where they decided to make the lower ranked wrestler go ahead. And if you say, well, yeah, because he was mathematically ahead, whereas Mitakeumi and Nishikigi were tied, Abi and Ryuden are tied, I would say yes, I understand, except some of the decisions they made later make this one look even stranger in retrospect. Now, as expected, Kota Shoho, Midori Fuji, Endo, they all went where we thought they would go. Midori Fuji and Endo were tied, but Midori Fuji, again, got that little bit of joy favoritism, it appears. And then we go to Sadano Umi and Hokuto Fuji. Now, this one was a little bit mind-blowing. Sadano Umi was Maegashira 4 West. which is like pseudo joy. He's like the first replacement for anybody in the joy who isn't able to fight somebody else in the joy, right? So he's going to get some Sanyaku fights. He's going to get some higher ranked fights. Hokuto Fuji was Maegashira 6E, so he manages to slip that. However, Hokuto Fuji did calculate a half rank ahead of Sadano Umi, the same way that Onisho calculated what I perceive to be a half rank ahead of Meisei. Again, the math with a Komusubi being dropped to Maegashira gets a little bit funky, but really it looked like a half rank. So how did Sadano Umi end up getting favoritism over a guy who he was behind? That usually doesn't happen. This is a situation that they have for the longest time just said, you know what, it is what it is. It doesn't matter if he's just a half rank behind, he's going behind the guy. Sadano Umi would be behind Hokuto Fuji because the math said he goes there. And they just didn't do that this time. I'm not sure why. This is another indication that there may be a general change in how the committee is approaching the way they make the Banzukes. It's not a lot to go on, but the fact that they went against the math, this wasn't a tiebreaker. I can't stress this enough. They weren't tied. There was a difference in where they added up to, and Sadano Umi was still pushed back ahead of Hokuto Fuji. We'll need maybe more evidence before we start to say that there's a pattern, but it's noteworthy that it happened at all. And then after Takayasu, who went exactly where we expected, hooray, and he went there with the assumption that Ura would have to be bumped down a half rank because they didn't have to leave him exactly in place, and this was a good place for Takayasu to go. They then put Ichi Yamamoto ahead of Ura. Now remember, Ichi Yamamoto and Aoyama were tied. They actually split those two up to put Ura in the middle. This is the interesting part. Mitake Umi, 7 and 8, he was pushed down one rank. It could have been a rank and a half, but they made it less. Hokuto Fuji looked like he should have only gone down a half rank, and they made it a full rank. Ura looked like he only should have gone down a half rank, and they made it a full rank. Let's step down a little bit further. Aoyama, exactly where we expected him to go. So he was 8 and 7, he went up one rank, but that was what we anticipated. And Hirata Umi, this was one I said they were pushing winning records ahead of rank in tiebreaker situations, but because Myogiryu would be over-demoted on him by being put at Maegashira 10, I thought they would give him priority. They didn't. Hirata Umi goes up a full rank on 8 and 7. So I am starting to wonder if all of these 8 and 7s and 7 and 8s are going to try to be pushed a full rank in whichever direction is appropriate more and more in the future. It's really unusual that they're doing it to the extent they're doing it. Hirata Umi and Myogiryu, again, they were tied, so okay, they can do that either way. But for Hokuto Fuji to get pushed, for Ura to get pushed, for Mitake Umi to get pushed back up, that's all pretty unusual. This is something to keep an eye on in the future. In any case, the very surprising Sadano Umi Hokuto Fuji flip and the less surprising Hirata Umi Myogiryu flip left us with 0 points for any of those guys. Boo-hoo, guess the Banzuke, I suck, I'll never make the top 10, wah. Let's go on from there, because it actually looks pretty good for the next couple ranks. Nishiki Fuji, right on the money. Azumaryu, Takano Sho, Kageyaki, Takara Fuji. Koto Echo ended up staying in place as expected, but look at Daishoho. So I moved Oho up specifically because I didn't think that they would push any juryo guys ahead of where they would calculate to. That was a bit of an educated guess at best on my part. It seemed to be what they do in general. Guys who they go up to a certain number and they always end up below that. But there are a lot of reasons why that could happen. It's not like that's the hard and fast rule that they even look at that at all. It could just happen that way for a lot of reasons. But Oho going from 4 and 11 down 4.5 ranks, that's not that unusual of a drop. It's happened before. Guys have gotten less of a drop than that before, and it was a good place for him to end up. What this looks like, and I mean this half seriously, I wonder if they just said, all right, fuck this guy. We're dropping him right down here, and he doesn't get to go anywhere. I wonder if they just put him at Maegashira 15 West, said that's where you're supposed to go, and you are not going anywhere else. You don't get to go up. You don't get a reprieve. You get to sit back in the basement and prove yourself again, because fuck you. We gave you a chance. You gave us hope Maybe these guys play fantasy sumo games and Oho fucked them all over. I don't know. But for Oho to get absolutely stuck at Maegashira 15 and everybody to rise above him really breaks a lot of precedents. What is worth noting is that this is actually very explainable. Once you put Oho at Maegashira 15 West, which again is precisely where the math said he should go, Chiyoshoma, Tsurugisho, and Mitoryu all calculated behind him. And there were exactly 3 ranks remaining behind him. If you put him there, and you're not going to shift the relative order of the guys in Makuuchi, those 3 have to go after him. They have to go 16 East, 16 West, 17 East. There's no other choice. Moving Oho up gives them more flexibility. So the surprising thing is that they didn't give themselves that flexibility. They just put themselves in a position where I guess we're just moving all the juryo guys ahead of them. There have been times in the history of the Banzuke where the decisions being made really look like the guys in charge are disappointed with somebody. Like they're mad at somebody, like they really just can't be arsed to be nice to a certain wrestler. And that for all the world, for all of the general rule following and precedent following and semi-predictability that this process has, that looks like what happened here. If you predicted that they were going to say, fuck you, Oho, we are not being kind to you, then you probably did great on this Guess the Banzuke. For me, and I know many, many, many others, the bottom of this thing has absolutely fucked us. But you know what? It was interesting. It was a learning experience. I'll take what I can from it. I hope you do too. I do have 2 questions about how this whole tournament is going to play out based on these placements. Number 1, how is Ryuden going to do? Now, this is bias. I am a Ryuden fan. I like the way he fights. I think he fights very intelligently. He is willing to take a guy into the deep waters and think his way out of situations. It's really impressive to me, even if it's not that explosive. But he hasn't been in the Joy yet, right? Well, not since his suspension. He has been slowly working his way back up the ranks. And even though he, in most situations, going into January, he would have been placed in the Joy, just the Banzuke being such a mess prevented that. Well, now he's there. Now he's got to fight all the big boys. How is he gonna do? He continues to succeed even against tough competition, but he never dominates all the way through. Is that gonna mean that he goes 7-8, 6-9, that this is just too much for him? Or can he stick? Can he pull a Tobizaru? And even though he wasn't doing amazingly at lower ranks, just good, he continues to do just as good even when the competition improved. And then the other one is much more obvious. What are we going to get from Kinbozan and Hokuseiho, and to a lesser extent Daishoho? I say to a lesser extent Daishoho because he's been around for a while. He's a little older. I think he's 28. This is the first time he's really done incredibly well. So I think there's going to be a lot of expectation that he's going to fall back a little bit. Maybe he'll stay at the bottom of Makuuchi. I don't think anyone's expecting him to really shoot up the ranks. But Kinbozan and Hokuseiho have had a lot riding on them for a long time. Hokuseiho is not what we might call a super active wrestler. He tries to use his size, and by that I mean his height, to his advantage, but he doesn't move that much. His knee might be a bigger problem than I think people who want to see him succeed would like, but it's hard to say. He does win. He has continued to get the job done, if not in superb fashion. Kinbozan, however, went 11-4. He's been very good. He's continuing to learn. He's young. He could pop off, especially when you look at the guys around him now. Yeah, Hokuseiho is obviously good. Daishoho did extremely well last time, but who knows? And you've got some tough competition who have been regulars in Makuuchi, but Chiyoshoma is fading. Mitoryu is not Makuuchi level. Tsurugisho is not really Makuuchi level, not on a regular basis. Oho, Jesus. Oho's going to take one look at these guys, crap himself, and just fall over. Guys like Kotoeko and Kageyaki, they're going to put up fights, but is that going to be enough, especially with somebody who's relatively healthy like Kinbozan? I don't know. I'm expecting Hokuseiho to have a winning record. I would not be the least bit surprised if Kinbozan had 10 wins in his debut here. But it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Alright, that's it for our Banzuke breakdown for the Haru Basho. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll come back for our next video, which is going to be a run through the probable schedules for all the guys in Makuuchi. That sounds like a lot, it probably is a lot, and it's definitely experimental, but we're gonna try and figure out the probable opponents for everybody in the top division for the first 8 days of the Basho. We'll see how that goes. But until then, have a great day, and I'll see you soon.